Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Electric Election Road Trip. I'm your host, Benji Backer, president and founder of the Conservation Coalition, and we are here joined by Lenwood Coleman in front of a solar flower, and Lenwood is the Chief Planning Officer of Groundswell. Lenwood, can you tell us where we're at and what you do and what Groundswell is?
Well, be my pleasure. First of all, we're in Baltimore and we're at Empowerment Temple Church, and we believe in solar energy, so it brought us here. Groundswell is originally from Washington, D.C., so I'll let you throw some questions at me and we'll smile and get through this together.
Awesome. Well, the work you're doing is so important because you're bringing community solar into communities. And can you talk a little bit, for a lot of people, they don't even know what community solar is. Can you talk about what community solar is and why it's so important?
It's extremely important. As you know, in the times that we live in today, our low moderate communities have a need to find whatever economic streams they can save money in. And with that, we find that energy is one of the best places in the home to find some return. How does that help them? If I can save you 25 to 50% on your utility bill, that means a pair of shoes, that could be a grocery bill, that could be medicine for the family at large. And if that's consistent over 15 to 20 years, it does make a difference for the family.
Well, yeah, Groundswell's website talks about how low-income communities end up paying the most for energy out of anybody in the country, and that's obviously a problem within itself. How did we get there? How did we get to the point where low-income communities were paying the most for energy, and is this part of that solution to break out of that?
Absolutely. As you think about it, where there is low moderate income communities, you usually have credit issues. Those credit issues also impact how you get additional charges and those fees that go along with it. Families can come into that community and many times they don't have jobs, and when they apply or get behind on their bills, those costs get pushed over to them in the utilities that they need. What we bring to the table is a unique formula. First, we educate. Second, we provide an avenue to lower the cost of the utilities. And then we provide jobs and we provide opportunities for small businesses to grow in those communities.
We're in a place, Baltimore, Maryland, that has been hit hard by the effects of climate change over the past decade or two, especially. How does that play into the work you're doing at Groundswell, and how can we involve more of these low-income communities in the climate conversation?
Well, that's a good question. And that takes a lot of work and it likes a lot of partnerships. Empowerment Temple provided us a location, an opportunity right in the middle of low moderate income communities. And with that, we don't just bring them energy. We bring them the opportunity for resiliency. We bring them battery storage. So think about it. You get this energy 300 and some odd days a year. Then let's say there's a disaster or a brownout. You have a resiliency hub. The energy produced here can be stored up at night or utilized when it's at the peak of cost. We can use the cheaper energy that was created to fuel those resiliency hubs. The battery storage provides three avenues: energy that's coming from the sun, storing it in batteries that can produce at a later time, and then a resiliency hub where we can meet the needs of the families and communities when there's a disaster. Medicine, food, a place to cool off. These are critical areas that we must address as the climate is changing all over, and you just don't know what we're going to run up against next.
Well, and honestly, until the past few years, I didn't fully, understand that low-income and minority communities were hit hardest by climate change. And when you look at the data and you hear the stories and you visit the communities, it's so obvious. How can we change this perception that climate change can only be fought in kind of the big cities by the big companies or the big politicians? And how can we make it more local, as you've been able to do here, and include new voices?
The more programs and projects we create, such as this one here at Empowerment Temple, the more news that is spread, the more success stories that we bring to the table, more energy and more funding is brought in to support building new programs and projects such as this. The more successful we are, the more visibility is put out there in the media to say, let's do more.
Well, those partnerships that you're talking about have been so integral for Groundswell because you've partnered with city governments, local governments, you've also partnered with churches and other small businesses. You're not just putting these solar farms and solar facilities in the middle of random neighborhoods. There's a strategic element here. Can you talk about the importance of those partnerships, why it's so important to work with the churches, with the businesses, and with the local governments in kind of this inclusive approach to bring solar to residential and low-income communities?
Let's start with the church. The church has always been the center point for communities and a trusting factor that you can't buy. It has to be appreciated and earned. So if the church says, we believe in this new energy and where it comes from and the concepts, what best way to have it from the pulpit to the community? So you look at the congregation, you look at the pastor who has forward thinking, and then that congregation goes back out into the community. They are our way of advertising and providing credibility. The city governments that reach it with us, the foundations that play a part in this partnership, they then believe that the community will protect the investments because they can see the return. So it's all connected.
Well, and I think that faith-based aspect is so important, and we've hit on this a few times over the course of this road trip. We've been traveling across the country, and there are a lot of people within the Christian faith who really care about the environment. I'm one of those, and there's like this moral component that there isn't maybe for other people, and there's a huge opportunity to bring in a community that has largely maybe been tapped out of the climate change conversation, and we can bring them in by talking about it through that faith-based perspective. When you talk to people in the faith community, whether that's here or in other facilities that you guys are working with, what are some of the main messages that you use to work with them on being part of these climate solutions and these common sense economical solutions, and what do they tell you?
Well, first of all, you probably have learned in your travels that many times in these communities, people overpromise and underachieve. So the first thing you do is provide credibility. As I would always say when I come in, if it's not in black and white, tear it up. If it costs you a dime, throw us out the door. When we come in and provide a program such as this and the services that come with it, we don't charge the community. We're here to make a benefit and a change in the life cycle of those communities. So with it, they look and say, where's the catch? Where's the catch? Where's the catch? But when we sign the paperwork, they're finally believers and they love us because we don't just look at the energy. We look at what are the needs of the community as well. And when you see your own doing this kind of work, it gives you some credibility. Returning citizens coming back and being trained. Small businesses that could not have gotten a portfolio needed so they could compete on a larger scale in the community and in a more for-profit type communities. They need this type of experience in order to take the next level. And then when you realize you can make a livable wage of $15 to $20 an hour in 6 months or 6 weeks of training, it speaks for itself.
So I think that level of trust that you have to kind of showcase is really important to the constituencies that you're trying to work with. Obviously, that's probably a barrier that you've had to success, is kind of people who put up that wall right away and don't trust. What are some of the other barriers that you've seen in trying to scale the work at Groundswell, maybe in the policy level or just from like the psychological level that you hope people would maybe know a little bit differently about? What are some of those barriers?
Well, the barriers is always money. We also run into issues of older churches and facilities that don't have the capability of us being able to put the roofs, utilize their roofs to put the solar arrays on them. Think about it. Churches normally have been 50, 60 years. Many times it's patchwork that's been done on the roof. We don't always have the funding to support that. So we have to look at different partners that can possibly bring that element so that we can have the success stories that we're bringing to you today.
So this solar flower helps power the church, and you're putting solar panels on the roof. It's making a massive impact, but a lot of times elected officials don't really understand what's going on in these communities and maybe don't make decisions for their communities because they don't understand what's going on. If you had an opportunity to talk to either local, state or national elected officials about projects like these, what would you hope that they would do?
First, I would invite them to come into these communities, not just drive by and take pictures. I would ask them, walk the neighborhood, really knock on some doors and see what they go through every day. The issues that they deal with, raising children, lack of funds in the home, and how do we bridge those gaps to improve the lifestyles of the low moderate income communities. It's impactful. We have to think about what makes them get to the next level. What will the next generation look like if we start right here? Can I make sure that they have a good breakfast in the morning? Can I make sure they have medication when they need it? And the first small steps play a large part. If I can save you $50 a month in a low moderate income family, $50 can go a long way. Think about it. We need to understand what they do to survive. And for that, we will think differently as to how we move our money and how we make decisions with the people's money when it comes to taxes and programs and services.
Well, there's a few aspects that I really want to touch on there. The first is the cultural aspect, which you hit on a little bit earlier in our discussion before we got on camera, talking about the importance of kind of planting the seed, right? Planting the seed of having children from the church coming out here, seeing what's going on, and then thinking about sustainability, bringing that back into their homes. That's something you brought up, and that's a cultural change that is so needed to start shifting the dialogue. But then there's also this economic change that needs to happen, which is you need to have communities uplifted economically for them to make sustainable solutions. So on that economic piece, there's obviously a lot of links to connect on that issue. What are some of the main, for this community in the Baltimore area specifically, what do you think are some of the main barriers to kind of that economic growth that is needed for people to be involved in processes like these?
Easy to say,
yes.
A lot to do. I keep it real simple. If I can only make $7 an hour, or I am still stuck on SNAP programs, I can't grow. All you're doing is keeping me in a place. And that is the worst thing you could do to any race or color, or it's just something we need to start thinking about. If I can give you $15 an hour, what's the difference? I can put clothes on my children's back. I can make sure they have the right knapsack to take to school with their books in it. And I elevate their thinking. If I can make 15, why can't I make 30? But if I'm always stuck with just barely getting by with just enough to stay in my house and maybe have a sandwich on the first of the month, we have taken away the ability to grow. So what do I say? When you see your own doing this work, when you see that they're making a livable wage, and that we will train in the community, and we make it free for them to be trained, we have built the building blocks to say, I can have a better life. And that we can't do it all, but we can start right here.
Well, and it seems like, kind of on that note, you think that there is a role to play for kind of all levels of government, the business community and the local community, as well as the faith community, to have an impact on the cultural and the economic side of it. And that's what we're learning over the course of this road trip, is that some people think that it should just be the federal government, some people think it should just be businesses, and there's this influx of need for more comprehensive change than that. You need a policy change, you need economic change, you need educational change, you need cultural change, you need faith-based change, and these issues are incredibly complex. And so I think your point of it's a lot easier to say than it is to do. I think raising wages is a huge part of it, but you also, there's an educational component. Like in these communities, I would assume that on issues like these, the educational aspect is also really important. important. Can you speak to, on climate and sustainability in these types of communities, what you think could be added as a benefit to the educational side of things, and where you think that growth can play a role in growing the work of Groundswell and community solar projects?
Well, did a mouthful again. No problem. We have learned that, first of all, to educate, we start with the young people. We, as I said before, we actually go into the church and we get a commitment. We don't just come in for 20 minutes, throw up your solar, and then we're gone. We actually train. What is green spaces? What is it to have the solar in your home? How many are interested? And we build from that and we keep growing. Empowerment Temple has provided us a great model to do that. They turn back around and they say, look, we reach out to the community all year long. We have their voice, their eyes, and their attention. So we turn back around and say, let us bring something in fruitful that adds to not just giving food during the holidays and giving clothing during that's what churches do every day. That is their need to be service-oriented to another brother or sister. But what we do, we let them see their own. In these communities, many times, they don't see their own excelling. And with that, they have no faith in, oh, they're just coming to do something else for us. But when we touch the home and the community, we've sparked a new life and a new energy that was not expected. When we say moderate low income, many times we're talking public housing. And we're talking at a level of everything is pretty much given. The policies have to change that allow them to grow out of that standard of living to the next level. Many generations seem to understand they don't actually get out of a 5-mile radius when they live in public housing. Live and die. Because they haven't seen much and don't have the economic wherewithal to move forward. We come to change that. If you're curious about having it and you can see a pathway, you can grow. And if the parents trust it, they can now trust the other things that come with it. How to take care of yourself, how to educate yourself, how this will impact the next generation. And that's what we need to do with these kinds of programs. Many times minorities are always on the back end of new technology and the opportunities. As they say, you know, like the Wild Wild West, when they had the gold rush, the rush went past us and then we got to get the crumbs. Well, here we are. Clean energy. It's the Wild Wild West right now. We need to be right there in the rush so that we can have the opportunities to get the gifts that come with it.
On that note, 2020 has been an incredibly important year for a lot of reasons, but we've also had a lot of conversations about racial equality in this country. Sure. Very important conversations. Now that we're at the point where we're kind of nearing the election and we've got about a month left and we're going to have a whole new year to start working on these things coming up, how does the conversation around racial equality play into your work at Groundswell? And for those who are viewing this, who have been paying attention, what do you hope they take away from the conversations that have been had this year?
Well, first of all, Groundswell from the beginning has always been about improving our relationships with our minorities and women. Let's not get confused. Women have been hitting that ceiling too. So with it, when you say where did we come in 2020, you have to go back to 2009 when Groundswell was created. Its foundation came from field operatives who worked for President Obama. And our CEO is Michelle Moore. And she worked in the White House for 7.5 years, dealing with energy, and came out with a vision that let us make everyone rise up, not just those who are already there. And with that, our conversation has never changed. 2020 was only us taking another leap forward and seeing if we could take advantage of the opportunities in front of us.
That's incredible. So we're running out of time, but I have one final question before our wrap-up question, which is, Groundswell has this incredible program in Baltimore, Maryland, but you're working on other programs as well. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other present programs as well as what you're hoping to do over the next couple of years?
Absolutely. We're having fun.
We don't want this to end.
We are having a wonderful year with all that is going on. We have expanded. We're currently in Hawaii, New York, Chicago, the Tri-City, Baltimore, Maryland, D.C. We're touching it. We're in Georgia, and we're in North Carolina. Some of our programs are dealing with the HBCUs in Atlanta as we look at ways to help low moderate income communities there with the support and energy that comes from Georgia Power. And we've gotten funding from DOE to make that happen. We're in New York trying to change a whole community called Plex, which is about 15 to 2,000 families, and we want to turn that whole community into solar, and we're going to make it happen. We're in DC with the Solar for All. We have done a unique process of modeling, utilizing the churches as a CDC to provide not just solar energy, but education and other programs throughout the year with funding. We're in Chicago, Illinois, and we're actually with the Illinois Solar for All program. And we have broke through quite a few barriers with an organization called My Community Plan Foundation, which is led by Reverend Mitchell Johnson. He has opened a lot of doors for us, and dealing with ComEd, we have found ways to deal with the politics and with the utilities to make that a successful venture. We are growing, and we love where we're headed.
Well, this green revolution that we're seeing across the country, like you had mentioned earlier, kind of forgot about low-income and minority communities for a very long time, and now you're bringing the green revolution back to local communities that need it the most, and you're uplifting them in a way that no one else is doing. And so I want to thank you for that. And I've learned so much from this conversation and from going across the country these past few weeks. We still have a few more weeks to go on this road trip. As a final piece of advice, what do you hope we learn and what do you hope we see over the next few weeks as we're traveling up until Election Day, going south and then heading back west? What do you hope we see and learn?
Hopefully you be careful. I know you got to stop every 200 miles.
It helps us refuel our bodies a little more, but it is slightly annoying.
Loving you, y'all do that well. But talk to some of the people, the folk that really benefit from this. Get an idea of why and see if some of the stories that you hear reflect what you're hearing today. It is important that we understand what $50 can do in the lives of a family. It's important to understand what it looks like to see those of your same skin in your community doing something that's important and having a lasting result. It's important to know that, hey, somebody thought about me. There was a true plan in place to make my life better. And I thank you for this opportunity to be able to speak to you all.
Well, it's been really inspiring to me and incredibly helpful. And like I said, I've learned a lot. I think what you're doing is so important. And like you said, energy costs matter. Energy costs on low-income communities especially matter. And $50 can make the world of a difference. You're helping bring those dollars back to their homes so that they can do more and that they're not forgotten. And that is so important. And you're involving the community, which we found is the missing link a lot of times in these environmental conversations, is that a lot of times we talk about it at this big global scale, which it is a global problem, but you have to make it local and you have to make it about the community that everyone loves and lives in and wants to protect for future generations, but they have to be equipped with the resources to do so. That's what Groundswell is doing, and I'm very thankful for your work. Appreciate the opportunity to learn from you, and hopefully this is the first of many conversations with you. And to our viewers, I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Electric Election Road Trip. I urge you to check out Groundswell's work either in your local community or in the communities that they're planning on being in going forward. And we'll see you next time on another episode of the Electric Election Road Trip.